Imagine this. You're sitting in first class, sipping a glass of champagne, minding your own business. Across the aisle, a billionaire genius, yes, that billionaire genius, relaxes with an odd little necklace around his neck. Then, out of nowhere, a smug flight attendant struts over, eyes locked on the necklace, and says something she instantly regrets. She thought she was being witty. She thought she could get away with it. But what happened next? Oh, it was legendary. Elon Musk, known for his cutting-edge technology and no BS attitude, responded in a way that left the entire first-class cabin in stunned silence. And let's just say that flight attendant's career would never be the same again. Want to hear the whole story? Buckle up, because before we dive in, if you love gripping real-life stories with shocking twists, hit that subscribe button on Storygram. We bring you the best viral stories every single day. All right, let's begin. The flight was boarding in Los Angeles, a long-haul route to Tokyo, and first class was already filling up with the usual mix of business executives, celebrities, and high-net-worth travelers. Among them sat Elon Musk, casually dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, his hair slightly disheveled as if he had just walked out of a 16-hour coding session. He looked like any other wealthy traveler who had no interest in flaunting his fortune, except for one thing. Around his neck hung a small, peculiar-looking necklace. It wasn't gold or diamond-studded, not the kind of thing billionaires usually wore. It was an unassuming metal pendant, almost industrial in design, hanging from a thin, black cord. It looked out of place on a man whose net worth made headlines weekly. Most passengers in first class kept to themselves, either staring at their phones or making quiet small talk, but one flight attendant couldn't help but notice the necklace. Her name was Amanda, and she prided herself on being a seasoned professional. She had served countless A-listers over the years, but something about Musk irritated her. Maybe it was the way he always seemed to have this detached, almost distracted look, as if his mind were light years away. Or maybe it was the fact that, despite his immense wealth, he didn't dress the part. She had seen tech billionaires before, and while some are known for their casual style, Musk's whole vibe seemed to disregard the luxury surrounding him. As she made her way down the aisle, taking pre-flight drink orders, she kept glancing at the necklace. It bothered her. It was just so odd. Cheap-looking, even. Almost like something a teenager would buy from a street vendor. She had served Musk before on previous flights, and she knew he was eccentric, but this was new, and she just had to say something. "Mr. Musk," she said in a polite yet slightly condescending tone as she reached his seat. "Champagne? Or something stronger for the flight?" Musk barely looked up. "Water's fine." Amanda smirked. "Water? Of course." He probably had some weird billionaire health routine, something about staying hydrated at altitude to maintain cognitive function. She had read enough gossip pieces about his extreme habits. But that wasn't what she was focused on. She took a step closer, glancing down at the necklace. "That's interesting," she said, tilting her head. "The necklace, I mean. Not what I expected someone like you to wear." Musk finally looked up, his blue-gray eyes locking onto hers with the faintest hint of amusement. He reached up, touching the pendant between his fingers. "Yeah?" he said. Amanda gave a small chuckle. "It's just different. Doesn't exactly scream billionaire, does it?" There was a brief silence, just long enough for Amanda to feel a slight pang of regret. She had said it in a light, joking manner, but something about the way Musk looked at her made her suddenly feel self-conscious. He didn't get angry. He didn't even frown. Instead, a slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "You'd be surprised," he said. And that's when something shifted. Amanda, expecting a short, dismissive reply, suddenly found herself on the receiving end of an energy she hadn't anticipated. Musk wasn't just some eccentric billionaire playing with a quirky fashion choice. That necklace meant something. And whatever it was, she had just unknowingly poked at something much bigger than she realized. Before she could respond, the intercom crackled to life. "Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff." Amanda gave a tight-lipped smile and moved down the aisle, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just walked into something far more interesting than she had bargained for. As the plane taxied down the runway, She stole another glance at Musk. He was still holding the pendant between his fingers, turning it over as if lost in thought. And then, just before the plane lifted off, he did something unexpected. He looked right at her and winked. That's when Amanda knew this wasn't over. The flight had reached cruising altitude, and the cabin settled into a quiet hum of soft conversation, clinking glasses, and the occasional ding of the call button. Amanda moved through first class with the ease of someone who had done this routine 1,000 times before, but her mind wasn't fully on the job. She couldn't stop thinking about that moment with Musk, the wink, the way he had touched the necklace. There was something there, something she had clearly missed. She had met plenty of rich, powerful men in her career, and most of them wore their wealth like armor. But Musk? He was different. She had always thought of him as this awkward, brilliant, but socially off-kilter guy, the type who could launch rockets but probably couldn't hold a normal conversation at a dinner party. Yet there was something in his reaction that made her second-guess that assumption. As she passed by his seat again, she noticed he wasn't asleep or watching a movie like the others. Instead, he was working, typing on a laptop, glancing occasionally at his phone, lost in whatever high-level calculations or ideas occupied his mind. But then, as if sensing her presence, he spoke without looking up. "You really want to know about the necklace, don't you?" Amanda stopped mid-step, surprised. She hadn't expected him to bring it up again. She considered brushing it off, making some excuse about just doing her job, but curiosity got the better of her. Yeah, she admitted, folding her arms. "It's unusual." Musk finally closed his laptop and leaned back in his seat, studying her for a moment. "Do you know what this is?" He lifted the pendant slightly, letting it catch the cabin light. Amanda shook her head. "Looks like a piece of metal on a string." He chuckled. "Close, but not quite." He held it up. "This isn't just any metal. This is a piece of the Raptor engine." She blinked. "The what?" "The Raptor engine. One of the first prototypes we tested for Starship." Now she really felt out her depth. She had read about Musk's companies, of course. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing about Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. But she wasn't exactly an aerospace engineer. Musk saw the confusion on her face and smirked. "Basically, this little piece helped power a test fire of one of the most advanced rocket engines ever built. It survived temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, insane pressure levels. Then it was discarded as scrap." He paused. "But I kept this one." Amanda stared at him. "Why?" Musk's expression changed. For a second, he wasn't the eccentric billionaire or the Twitter meme king. He was just a guy looking at something that meant a lot to him. "Because this engine failed." She frowned. "And that's a good thing?" Musk nodded slowly. "It is when you learn from it. This was an early prototype. It didn't work the way we wanted, but every failure gets us closer to success. Every mistake teaches us something. This piece," he tapped the pendant, "reminds me that nothing great is built without setbacks, and that giving up is never an option." Amanda didn't know what to say. She had expected some quirky story, maybe even a joke. Instead, she got something real. She looked at the pendant again, seeing it in a different light. Not just a random scrap of metal, but a symbol. A piece of something that once had the potential to reach space and now rested around the neck of the man, trying to make it happen. For the first time that night, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected: respect. But before she could respond, another voice interrupted. "Well, that's cute. The billionaire wears failure around his neck." Amanda turned to see the man in the seat across from Musk, that he was mid-40s, dressed in an expensive suit, and had the unmistakable aura of someone who thought he was the smartest person in the room. Musk didn't even flinch. "Something on your mind?" he asked, his tone light but sharp. The man smirked. "Just saying, most guys at your level wear Rolexes or Patek Philippe's. You're walking around with a piece of trash from a busted engine." He shook his head. "That's a hell of a brand statement." Amanda felt a rush of irritation, but Musk just smiled. "Tell me something," he said. "What's the most valuable thing you own?" The man seemed thrown by the question. Well, I have a Patek Grand Complication limited edition, worth over 200K. Musk nodded. "Nice watch. Tells time, right?" The man frowned. "Obviously." Musk lifted his necklace slightly. This, this tells a story. Silence. Amanda watched as the man shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting that response. Musk didn't break eye contact. The difference between us, he continued, is that you measure value in price tags. I measure it in impact. Your watch, it'll sit on your wrist and look pretty. This piece of metal, it represents every mistake, every breakthrough, every lesson that's gotten us closer to Mars. He let the pendant drop back against his chest. So you tell me, what's worth more? The man had no comeback. Amanda turned away, pretending to focus on another passenger, but inside, she was grinning. For the first time in her career, she was starting to realize that some people were on a completely different level, not because of their money, but because of how they thought. And Elon Musk, he wasn't just different. He was in a league of his own. The rest of the first-class cabin had gone quiet. Conversations had faded, and even those pretending not to listen were now fully tuned in. It wasn't every day you saw someone try to challenge Elon Musk and get completely dismantled in less than a minute. Amanda glanced at the businessman across from Musk that he was shifting in his seat, pretending to check his phone, clearly regretting his attempt at a clever remark. The smug confidence he had displayed earlier was gone, replaced with something closer to embarrassment. Musk, on the other hand, had already moved on. He reopened his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than a brief distraction. Amanda hesitated for a second before stepping closer. That was something, she said in a low voice. Musk didn't look up. People get weird about symbols, he said. They think value is about how expensive something is. But real value is about meaning. She nodded, unsure of what to say. She wasn't the type to get philosophical on the job, but something about what he said stuck with her. Before she could respond, another passenger called her over. She turned to go, but as she walked away, she heard Musk mutter, almost to himself, "People don't like being reminded that their priorities are hollow." The flight continued in relative quiet for a while. Dinner service came and went, and soon, most passengers were settling in for the long-haul flight. Some had reclined their seats and slipped on masks, while others scrolled through their tablets or watched movies. Amanda had just finished checking on a passenger when she noticed the man across from Musk wasn't done with him yet. He leaned forward, clearing his throat. "All right, I'll bite," he said. Musk kept typing. "About what?" The man smirked, regaining some of his earlier confidence. "About this whole symbolism overpriced thing. Easy for you to say when you can buy anything you want. If that little necklace is so valuable to you, would you trade it for, say, $1 million? Amanda stopped mid-step. She wasn't sure why, but something about the question felt off. Musk didn't hesitate. "No." The man raised an eyebrow. $10 million? Musk sighed, finally looking up. "You think this is about money?" The man shrugged. "Everything is." Musk allowed a short laugh. "That's why you don't get it." He closed his laptop, sitting back. "Let me ask you something. What's the most important lesson you've learned in your career?" The man seemed caught off guard. I don't know. Hard work pays off?" Musk shook his head. "No, that's just what people say when they don't want to admit luck played a role. Try again." The man frowned, thinking, "All right, maybe that relationships matter more than talent?" Musk nodded slightly. Closer. He lifted the pendant again, rolling it between his fingers. "This represents the real answer. The most important lesson in any career, any life, is that failure is the only path to success." The man scoffed. "That's just motivational nonsense." Musk smiled. "Is it? Let's look at the numbers. Tesla almost died several times. SpaceX nearly collapsed when our first 3 rocket launches failed. The 4th one barely made it, and we had just enough money left to try once more. If that last launch had failed, none of this would exist." He tapped the pendant. This was a failure. A real one. Not a setback. Not a delay. A full-blown, this might end everything failure. And that's exactly why it matters. Amanda watched as the businessman shifted in his seat again. This time, there was no smirk. Musk leaned forward slightly. "You don't get it because you've never bet everything on something you could fail at." He gestured vaguely. "Maybe you're successful, maybe you've made money, but you've never stared down complete collapse and kept going anyway. And that's fine. Most people don't. But that's the difference between people who build the future and people who just live in it. Silence stretched between them. Amanda realized she had been holding her breath. The businessman finally leaned back, exhaling sharply. Damn, he muttered under his breath. Musk picked up his laptop again. Exactly. Amanda moved back down the aisle, checking on other passengers, but she kept thinking about what she had just heard. She had spent years serving the rich and powerful. She had heard all kinds of stories, seen all types of personalities. Most of them weren't all that interesting once you got past the money. But this was different. She glanced back at Musk one last time. He was already lost in his work again, as if the conversation had never happened. But for everyone else who had heard it, something had changed. And Amanda had a feeling this flight wasn't over yet. The cabin lights had dimmed, and most passengers had settled into a quiet, drowsy rhythm. Some had reclined their seats fully, wrapped in soft airline blankets, while others absently scrolled through their screens, the glow reflecting on their tired faces. The hum of the engines filled the silence, a steady background noise that made the space feel almost serene. Amanda moved through first class with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this routine 100 times before. But tonight, something felt different. She had been a flight attendant long enough to know that certain passengers carried an energy that shifted the atmosphere around them. It wasn't always about money or power. Sometimes it was just presence. And tonight, there was no denying that Elon Musk had that effect. She had tried to brush it off, tried to tell herself that this was just another flight with another high-profile passenger. But the way he had spoken, the way he had dismantled that businessman's argument with such ease, stuck with her. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't even about proving a point. It was just how he thought. She had never really understood people like him. People who lived in a world where failure wasn't an obstacle, but a requirement. It was unsettling and fascinating all at once. As she reached Musk's seat again, she noticed he wasn't asleep. While other passengers were drifting off, he was still working, the soft glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. He looked completely absorbed, as if he had forgotten he was on a plane at all. Without really thinking, Amanda leaned slightly toward him. "You don't sleep much, do you?" Musk looked up, blinking as if coming back to reality. "Not really," he admitted. "Too much to do." She smirked. "Even on a long-haul flight?" He shrugged. "Some of the best ideas come when you're stuck somewhere with no distractions." She nodded, glancing at the screen. She had no idea what she was looking at, some kind of spreadsheet or coding interface, maybe even rocket schematics, but it all seemed incredibly complex. "Can I ask you something?" she said hesitantly. Musk closed his laptop slightly. "Sure." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Why do you actually do it? The companies, the stress, the constant pressure. You could have stopped years ago and lived an easy life. Why keep pushing?" Musk studied her for a second, then looked down at the necklace again, rolling the metal piece between his fingers. "I get that question a lot," he said finally. "People assume it's about money or ego, but the truth is, I don't really have a choice." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He exhaled, leaning back in his seat. "Most people don't think about the future beyond their own lifetime. They assume things will just keep moving forward. But progress isn't automatic. Civilizations rise and fall. Knowledge is gained and lost. If we don't actively push forward, we risk stagnation or worse." Amanda wasn't sure how to respond. She had expected some kind of cliché answer, something about passion or innovation. But this was deeper. Musk continued, his voice quieter now. "I don't think people realize how fragile everything is. We've been lucky, coasting on a few centuries of rapid progress. But luck runs out. If we don't become a multi-planetary species, if we don't push the boundaries of technology, we're just waiting for the next catastrophe to reset everything." She swallowed. "That's kind of terrifying." He gave a small, almost sad smile. "It should be, but it's also motivating. There's no guarantee we make it. So I do what I can while I can." Amanda felt a strange chill run through her. She had served countless CEOs, politicians, and celebrities, and most of them were obsessed with their own legacy, their own success. But Musk wasn't talking about himself. He was talking about something much bigger. She glanced at the pendant again and finally understood. It wasn't just a reminder of failure. It was a reminder of why failure mattered. She straightened up, feeling a little out of depth. Well, she said, try to lighten the mood. That's definitely a better reason than just wanting to be the richest guy in the world. Musk chuckled. Money is just a tool. The goal is what matters. Amanda nodded, then glanced down the aisle. The other flight attendants were going through the cabin, making their final checks before the scheduled rest period. She looked back at Musk. You want anything before I leave you to your world saving? He smiled. I'm good. Thanks. She turned to walk away, but before she could, he spoke again. Amanda. She stopped, surprised that he had remembered her name. Yeah? Musk tilted his head slightly. Most people wouldn't have asked. She wasn't sure what to say to that, so she just nodded. As she walked away, she realized something strange. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had just learned something that actually mattered. And somehow, she knew this flight wasn't done teaching her yet. Hours passed, and the cabin remained in a quiet lull. The hum of the engines, the occasional chime of a passenger call button, and the distant murmur of the crew in the galley were the only sounds. Most of first class was asleep now, wrapped in blankets, heads tilted at odd angles, their high-end lives momentarily paused at 40,000 feet. Amanda had taken a short break, but found herself restless. Something about the conversation with Musk had unsettled her, not in a bad way, but in a way that made her feel like she was on the edge of understanding something important. She wasn't the type to dwell on things. Her job was to keep people comfortable, make the flight smooth, and, when necessary, deal with the occasional difficult passenger. But this was different. She glanced toward Musk's seat. He was still awake. Laptop open, fingers tapping the keys, eyes flickering between screens filled with data she would never understand. His focus was intense, as if time worked differently for him. She hesitated, then walked over. Still going? She asked, keeping her voice low. Mustn't look up. Almost done. She leaned slightly against the seat divider. I don't get it. You have people who can do this for you. Teams of engineers, the best minds in the world. Why are you still up at, she checked her watch, 3 in the morning, working on whatever that is? Musk finally looked at her. His expression wasn't one of annoyance or even exhaustion. If anything, he looked amused. You think I do this because I have to? He asked. She shrugged. I think most people in your position would have checked out a long time ago. He smiled slightly. Most people in my position didn't get here by checking out. She folded her arms. Okay, but at some point, doesn't it become enough? The money, the success, the influence? What more is there? Musk shut his laptop, thinking for a moment. Let me ask you something. Do you remember the first time you looked up at the sky and really thought about how big it was? Amanda frowned. I guess. Probably when I was a kid. What did it feel like? She hesitated, then said like I was small, like everything was bigger than me. Musk nodded. That's the right answer. He tapped his fingers on the closed laptop. Most people grow up and stop thinking about that feeling. They get caught up in work, bills, daily life. The world shrinks down to what's right in front of them. Amanda tilted her head. And you? He smirked. I never stopped looking up. Silence stretched between them. Amanda glanced at the pendant again. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was proof. Proof that even the biggest failures could mean something. You ever think about quitting? She asked. Musk consider the question. Every day. That caught her off guard. He continued. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. People doubt you, mock you, try to stop you. And sometimes it feels like no matter how hard you push, it'll never be enough. He exhaled. But then I remember, no one else is going to do it. Amanda studied him, realizing something. It wasn't that he wanted to keep going. It was that he had to, because if he didn't, who would? She shook her head. You're insane. Musk chuckled. Probably. A passenger stirred in the seat behind them, and Amanda straightened. She had already spent too much time here. She took a small step back. Well, for what it's worth, I think it's kind of cool. Musk gave a small nod, then reopened his laptop. Thanks. Amanda turned to walk away, but this time, she didn't feel restless. She felt like she had just witnessed something rare. Not a billionaire, not a genius, just a person who refused to stop looking up. And for the first time in her life, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had been looking too low. The cabin remained quiet as the hours ticked by. The vast stretch of the Pacific Ocean lay beneath them, unseen, as the plane carried its passengers toward Tokyo. Amanda had finished her duties for the night and found herself lingering near the galley, staring absently at the small window. There was nothing but darkness outside. No city lights, no landmarks, just the endless sky and the vast unknown beneath them. She thought about everything that had happened on this flight. She had expected another routine trip, some VIP passengers, maybe a bit of attitude from the wealthy elite, and the usual polite small talk. Instead, she had stumbled into a conversation that had shaken something loose inside her. She had never cared much for space, rockets, or the kind of work Musk did. To her, it had always seemed distant, something for scientists, engineers, and billionaires to worry about. But now, after hearing him speak, after watching the way he thought about failure, progress, and the future, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had been missing something important all along. For the first time in years, she felt small in a way that wasn't depressing but exciting. As she made her way back down the aisle, she saw that Musk had finally dozed off. His laptop was still open on the tray table, a screen filled with complex data, but his head had tilted slightly to the side, eyes closed. The pendant rested against his chest, the small piece of failed machinery that had once been discarded but now carried more meaning than any expensive watch or status symbol. Amanda hesitated, then quietly reached over and adjusted the blanket over him. He didn't stir. She smiled to herself and moved on. The rest of the flight passed in peaceful silence. As the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden glow over the horizon, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their descent into Tokyo. The cabin slowly came back to life. Passengers stirred, stretching and rubbing sleep from their eyes. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, preparing for landing. Amanda passed by Musk's seat again just as he woke up, blinking against the morning light streaming through the window. "Morning," she said. He gave a small nod. Didn't mean to fall asleep. "You earned it," she said, glancing at the laptop. "Save the world yet?" "Not yet," he said, stretching. "But getting there." The plane touched down smoothly, and soon, passengers were gathering their belongings, preparing to step back into their busy lives. Musk closed his laptop, stood up, and adjusted his hoodie. Before he grabbed his bag, he turned to Amanda one last time. "You ever think about what's next?" he asked. She frowned. "What do you mean?" He gestured vaguely. "After this, after doing the same thing every day, ever think about what else is out there?" She hesitated. "I guess, but I wouldn't even know where to start." Musk studied her for a moment, then reached up and unclasped the necklace from around his neck. She blinked. "What are you?" He placed it in her hand. She stared at the small, worn piece of metal, the weight of it surprising in her palm. "Start by remembering this," he said. "Failure isn't the end. It's just data." She looked up at him, speechless. Musk gave a small nod, then turned and walked toward the exit, blending into the flow of passengers. Amanda stood there, gripping the pendant, the cold metal warming against her skin. For the first time in a long time, she felt something stir inside her, something unfamiliar but undeniable. Possibility. And as she watched the man who never stopped looking up disappear into the world beyond the airport gates, she realized something. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to start looking up too.